The sun dipped low, casting long shadows on the suburban streets. It was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, but peace was a fragile illusion in a neighborhood like this. I stood in front of my house, watching her, Marjorie DeWitt, strut down the sidewalk with a clipboard in hand, that smug, self-satisfied grin on her face. She was the HOA president, but not in the sense of public servant. No, she ruled with an iron fist, and anyone who dared defy her was made an example of. And I had just become her latest target. I wasn't going to take it lying down. You don't mess with someone who knows exactly how the game works. I'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The confrontation was coming, and it wasn't going to be pretty. I threw open the door and stepped outside, feeling the cold concrete beneath my feet. I'd seen enough. The notices taped to my mailbox, the whispered accusations about my property. None of it was true. Yet here she was, dictating her version of reality for everyone else to hear. She saw me. I saw her. She didn't flinch. "You know what this is about, don't you?" she said, her voice sickly sweet, like honey with a knife edge. "I'm giving you one last chance to come clean, Cole. I've got neighbors calling about the illegal Airbnb you've been running out of your home." "Illegal?" I shot back, stepping closer, my fists clenched. "This is just a guest house for my brother, but I guess that's too complicated for someone like you." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I haven't noticed? You've been hiding behind your nice little facade, making money while the rest of us follow the rules. Well, it's time you faced the consequences." I laughed. "Is this what you do? Stand around, accuse people, make up stories?" She didn't reply. Instead, she pressed the clipboard against her chest like it was her shield. "You're pushing your luck, Cole. I'm filing an official complaint. The HOA board's already on it." "Great. I can't wait for this to go public. You know, Marjorie, you've been running the show for a long time, but it's about to come to an end, and I'm going to be the one to make sure of it." Her lip curled into a sneer. "You'll regret this." And just like that, the gauntlet had been thrown down. A war of words, but beneath it, a clear line in the sand. Marjorie wanted me out, and I had no intention of backing down. Marjorie DeWitt had been the queen of this neighborhood for years. She played the part well, too well. The power she wielded wasn't just in her title as HOA president. It was in the way she manipulated everyone around her. Fear, control, submission. That was her game. I knew exactly what I was dealing with, but that didn't mean I was going to just roll over. No, I'd seen her in action before. I'd watched her destroy people's lives with just a whisper. A neighbor who once dared to challenge her had been run out of town within weeks. They lost their home, their business, their reputation. Marjorie had a way of making sure everyone knew you were a problem that needed to be eliminated. But I wasn't like them. I'd been watching, listening, and learning for a long time. And now it was my turn to turn the tables. The first move came a week after that confrontation in front of my house. A notice appeared taped to my door detailing an emergency HOA review of my property for alleged unsanctioned business operations. It was a blatant power move. She was trying to corner me, to set a trap I couldn't escape. I wasn't stupid. I knew she had people watching. The HOA had a network of eyes in every corner, even in places I'd never expect. But that didn't matter anymore. The first meeting was nothing short of a circus. Marjorie stormed in, her heels clicking like daggers, surrounded by her loyal cronies. She wasn't even trying to hide her smugness. Cole Matthews is running a business from his home, she announced, before I could even say a word. And I won't stand by and watch someone flout our rules like this. I didn't let her finish. You're accusing me of something you can't even prove. How about you stop throwing around baseless claims and show us some evidence? Her eyes flashed. She didn't like being challenged, but this wasn't the first time I'd been in a fight. It wouldn't be the last. She tried to push the issue with a series of trivial complaints: noise levels, parking violations, things that didn't hold any weight. But I was ready. I had already prepared a countermeasure: receipts, photos, and proof that none of the things she was accusing me of had any merit. Her face was red with anger by the end of it. This is just the beginning, Cole, she spat. I'll make sure you regret challenging me. I'm not afraid of you, I shot back. You're not invincible. The war was on, and Marjorie wasn't backing down, but I wasn't either. After that meeting, I didn't let the pressure get to me. I did exactly what she never expected. I started looking at the cracks in her fortress, the cracks no one else had the guts to touch. I started reaching out to neighbors, people who had been silent, too scared to speak up for fear of retribution. But there were more than a few who knew exactly what I was talking about. People who had witnessed Marjorie's reign of terror firsthand, but had been too afraid to say anything. It wasn't long before I started collecting the pieces I needed. One woman, Carol, told me about the time Marjorie had forced her to pay an illegal fine for something as simple as a flower bed in her front yard. She didn't like the colors I picked, Carol said. She told me to remove them or pay a fine. When I refused, she had my utilities cut off. That was one violation, just the tip of the iceberg. I dug deeper. I spoke to Carl, a former board member who was more than happy to spill the truth about how Marjorie had manipulated votes to secure her position. She's been running things like a dictatorship for years, Carl said, and anyone who gets in her way gets steamrolled. It was clear now. I wasn't the only one she'd hurt, and it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing her, tearing down everything she'd built. I started pulling documents, going over every scrap of paper she'd ever touched: emails, contracts, budgets, everything. And piece by piece, the story became clearer. This was no simple HOA issue. This was about power, control, and a woman who believed she could break the rules and get away with it. But I wasn't going to let her. The more I uncovered, the more her grip on the neighborhood started slipping. People began to notice. A few courageous souls began to whisper, and as they whispered, they got louder. Soon it wasn't just me. People were starting to join in, but Marjorie wasn't done yet. No, she had just started. The morning was quiet, too quiet. Then came the knock, not a friendly one, a deadbeat thump, 3 times. I opened the door and found 2 city inspectors standing like hired guns. One held a clipboard, the other had a smug look that screamed, "We're here to fuck your day up." Anonymous complaint, the clipboard guy said, like it was routine. But there was nothing routine about what followed. Citation after citation. Weed overgrowth on the east fence, chipped paint on the back porch, a supposedly unapproved color of exterior light bulb. That was the cherry on top. I stood there, arms folded, jaw locked, while they read off every bullet point Marjorie must have compiled, like she was playing bingo with my property. "You've got 15 days to comply, or face penalties, clipboard said. 15 days to paint a back porch no one sees? I laughed, low and bitter. Sounds like someone up the chains got a hard-on for my house. They didn't respond, just handed me the papers and walked off, not even pretending it wasn't coordinated. Later that day, a post appeared in the community group chat. If you see something shady, report it. We don't want illegal activity in our neighborhood. No names, no proof, but everyone knew who it was about. My phone buzzed with screenshots from neighbors who were still brave enough to speak to me. Marjorie was broadcasting the hit, like a mob boss bragging about a job well done. At the next HOA meeting, she made her next move. I walked in, and it felt like stepping into a courtroom where the verdict was already written. A slideshow lit up the projector. Grainy photos of my front yard, driveway, and even a guest arriving late at night. Ladies and gentlemen, she began with that plastic smile. This is what an illegal Airbnb operation looks like, right here in our community, people whispered. One guy shook his head. I stood there, surrounded by flashing images and gasps like I was on trial for murder. No permits, no disclosure, complete disregard for our policies, she hissed, pacing the floor like a prosecutor. I raised my hand. You done? Excuse me? She snapped. I said, are you done? I said louder, stepping forward. Because the only thing illegal here is the fact that you've been secretly using HOA funds to renovate the clubhouse without a single vote from the board. The room dropped silent. She blinked. Her mouth twitched, but no words came out. I've got receipts, I said, tossing a folder onto the table. It slapped the wood loud enough to make some flinch. She smirked again. Fake. You can explain that to the city auditor. For the next week, the retaliation got brutal. Fines stacked on my mailbox like hate mail. My driveway was suddenly marked with chalk. Someone tried to egg my car. A neighbor caught it on their Ring camera. Same teenager who used to mow lawns for Marjorie's husband. Calls came in from a concerned HOA board member to my boss at work. Subtle, slimy. They didn't say anything explicit, but the damage was done. Suddenly, I was being reviewed for policy adherence. My remote status was questioned. Pressure from above. I started having trouble sleeping, not because I was scared, but because my mind wouldn't shut off. I ran simulations all night. What else could she try? What other strings could she pull? One night, I broke down. Just for a moment. Hands shaking, I almost threw the folder of evidence across the room. But then I opened the back page, a photo of Marjorie standing outside the HOA maintenance shed. The date stamp was from a month ago, the same day she claimed to be in Tampa for a conference. Liar. Caught. I stared at that photo until my heart slowed. I poured whiskey in a glass, then sat down, looked over the web I'd built. Every document, every whisper from a neighbor, every careless email she thought no one saved. She thought I'd break. She thought I was some new homeowner playing pretend in the big leagues, but I wasn't playing. I was documenting, building, and I was almost ready. I stopped reacting. That was step one. Let her keep swinging wildly while I started pulling strings behind the curtain. I reached out to ex-board members, people she'd stepped on years ago, left out of power, discarded when they weren't useful anymore. Most were cautious. Some were bitter. But one, Cliff, was angry enough to help. Marjorie always thought the bylaws were just suggestions, he said, handing over a USB stick. This has meeting minutes from 2018. She altered the records. See for yourself. He was right. The document metadata told the whole story. Two versions, same day. One official, one edited, one where a critical vote magically passed after it had failed. That was step two, real documentation. I spent days building the file, not just one damning piece, a fortress, chronological, verifiable. From petty misuse of funds to full on fraudulent vote manipulation, I backed everything up in triplicate, cloud, hard drive, encrypted USB in a fireproof box. No more casual complaining. I was building a missile. Then came the attempt at diplomacy. A board member, Janine, called me for coffee. She tried to play the peace angle. No one wants to escalate this further, she said. We can find a way to coexist. I sipped my drink, calm as ever. This isn't about coexistence anymore. You're either helping bury the body or you're helping dig it up. She didn't speak after that. She just left the cafe, looking like someone who'd just been handed a mirror and didn't like what she saw. I sent a letter to the regional HOA Oversight Council, anonymous, detailed, full of timelines, testimony, and evidence. I didn't expect them to take action, but I wanted to make sure this thing echoed outside our little cul-de-sac bubble. The next day, Marjorie went nuclear. A notice appeared taped to my garage door. Effective immediately, I was being fined $200 per day for operating a commercial enterprise from residential property. Not a warning, a fine. Active, no due process. Attached was a grainy photo of a friend visiting me with luggage. That was her boldest move yet, fabricating a crime from a snapshot. She wasn't hiding it anymore. This was a full-on hit job. But here's the part she didn't expect. My neighbor, Edgar, called me, said his wife had received a letter warning her against associating with a disruptive resident. The envelope had no stamp, just tucked into their mailbox late at night. Marjorie wasn't just trying to take me down. She was trying to make an example of me. She thought if she won here, she could rule unchecked. She was about to learn what happens when you push someone too far. I called a meeting of my own, informal, off the record, at the Community Recreation Center. I expected 5 people. 13 showed up. Half of them were too scared to speak, but they listened. I laid it all out. The misuse of funds, the intimidation, the doctored votes. One man, Paul, sat in the corner silently. When I was done, he stood up and simply said, "She did the same thing to my wife in 2019. Ran her out. She loved this neighborhood." He dropped a file on the table and walked out. It was filled with old email printouts, Marjorie demanding votes, threatening consequences. Paul had been saving them for years, waiting for someone to do what he couldn't. It all fit. That night, I compiled everything, every file, every photo, every voice note, and made copies for each person at the meeting. No more secrets, no more isolation. Let them try to cut me off now. Let her try to say it's just me making noise. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. 3 days later, she filed a formal request to revoke my residency for community disruption. The hearing was set for Friday night, just before the weekend. Classic play, try to bury it while people are distracted, but I wasn't hiding anymore. Friday was going to be the reckoning. Friday night. The community center lights buzzed overhead like nervous energy made electrical. Rows of plastic chairs lined up like a courtroom. Every seat was filled. HOA members, residents, even people I hadn't seen in weeks. Everyone came out for the bloodbath. At the front, Marjorie sat tall behind her usual faux wood podium, face like granite, lips twisted in that permanent smirk. She had her little circle around her: Janine, two board members, and a fresh-faced HOA lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She hit the gavel once. The room fell silent. We're here to address ongoing violations by Mr. Cole Matthews, violations that undermine the peace and integrity of our community, she said, voice dripping with authority. She was ready to play judge, jury, and executioner. I stood from the back and walked forward slowly, folder in hand, like a soldier walking through smoke. No fear, no hesitation, just fire in the veins and truth in the grip. Before you start, I said, voice loud, steady, I have something that needs to be heard by everyone. Marjorie didn't blink. This is a hearing, not a stage for drama. Funny. That's what I said when you put up photos of me at the last meeting. Guess that was different. A few murmurs. She didn't like that. I've brought copies of every citation, every fine, every email, every surveillance photo that's been used against me without due process. And I've matched them with internal records, testimonies, and communications from former board members, some of whom are here tonight. She narrowed her eyes, face tightening. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. This has it all, and I've already sent backups to the City Compliance Office, the HOA State Board, and every local news outlet with a housing watchdog. Boom. The room inhaled. She tried to speak, but I cut her off. Oh, and by the way, I added, pulling up a printed photo, you were never in Tampa during the maintenance fund vote. You were here in the shed, approving illegal renovations without board consent. I dropped the photo onto the table. A beat passed. You altered minutes of 3 meetings in 2018, pressured board members to resign, redirected landscaping funds into unauthorized clubhouse work. You even threatened residents who voted against your initiatives. I've got signatures, records, timestamps, and affidavits. Lies, she shouted, standing. This is slander. No, I snapped back. This is a reckoning. Her voice rose. He's unstable. He's running a business out of his house. Prove it, I barked. Show them a listing, a transaction, a guest log. You can't, because it never existed. You fabricated every charge to cover your own ass. She spun toward her allies. Do something. You're on the board. But they sat, frozen. Janine looked down. One board member quietly slid his chair back. Marjorie reached for her folder, yanked out a printed sheet, and held it high, like a final dagger. This is a letter from the city. I spoke to the city yesterday, I said. That letter was never issued. They're investigating who forged their letterhead. Silence dropped like a hammer. People started whispering. Faces turned. The lawyer beside her leaned over and said something low. She went pale. This meeting's over, she stammered. No, it's not. Paul's voice rang from the back. He stepped forward. I moved to motion a vote of no confidence in Marjorie DeWitt as HOA president. Gasps. Seconded. A man raised his hand. Then another, and another. Then nearly the whole room. She stood alone. Number, this is illegal. You can't do this. I am this HOA. No, I said. You were. She tried to gather her papers, stumbling through protest, but the room was moving without her. Residents formed a circle, talking, organizing. The energy shifted like a tide turning. She backed away from the table. Her chair scraped loud against the floor. No one followed her. The room had flipped from hunted to hunter, and I didn't even need to raise my voice. The door slammed shut behind Marjorie like a final gavel strike echoing down a tomb. For a moment, no one said anything. It was like the spell had broken, and people didn't know what world they were in anymore. Then, slowly, one by one, the crowd began to murmur, quiet at first, then rising. She's done. Did you see her face? She fighting forged documents. A wave of voices, tension bleeding out of 100 chests at once. It felt like a city exhaling after a years-long siege. Paul shook my hand, tight, firm. You did what no one else had the guts to. I nodded, but my eyes were still locked on the door. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, her name was wiped off the HOA website. An emergency meeting was called. Her spot declared vacant, but her loyalists weren't gone. They just went underground. Janine didn't speak to anyone at the meeting. She left early. 2 others resigned, but that didn't mean the rot left with them. By Monday, I was getting anonymous letters. No return address, just black envelopes with things like, "You're not safe," or "You think this is over?" Childish, maybe, but desperation never looks rational. That same week, I noticed a car parked across from my house for 2 hours. Didn't move, same one the next night. And again. I started recording plates, dates, times, just in case. You don't survive a political predator by celebrating too early. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was shifting. People started knocking on my door, not to argue, but to confess. "She did it to me too." One woman whispered. She fined me for having a bird feeder, said it attracted pests. I cried for days. Another guy gave me receipts of missing HOA funds from a decade ago. I tried to speak up once. She told me she'd have my mortgage pulled. I kept it all. I was no longer just the guy who stood up. I was becoming something else, something more dangerous, an example. But the more visible I became, the more I felt the heat. My mailbox was smashed, my recycling bin set on fire, my dog poisoned. He survived, barely. The vet said it was antifreeze, deliberate. The police shrugged. Could be a coincidence. It never is. That's when I realized this wasn't a win. This was the first shot in a wider war. A system that lets someone like Marjorie reign for years doesn't fold in one night. It retaliates, bleeds out slow. She filed a defamation suit 2 weeks later, claimed I ruined her public image, cost her job prospects, and endangered her safety. I laughed when I read it. Then I got to work. Her lawsuit was weak, built on lies and PR stunts, but it gave her what she really wanted: time. Time to rally her allies, reshape the story, frame herself as the victim. The exiled queen wronged by angry villagers. She started appearing on HOA Facebook groups, posting vague warnings. Don't trust self-appointed heroes. They crave power more than justice. Some people believed her. That's the thing about cult leaders. They don't vanish. They multiply in whispers. But I didn't stop. I hosted open forums, got backing from legal aid, built a coalition to audit the HOA's last 10 years of finances, found more dirt than I expected: fraud, nepotism, bribery disguised as vendor contracts. The board restructured, members rotated out, new voices entered. But at every step, Marjorie's shadow loomed like smoke in the walls. Then came the anonymous email, photos of me from years ago, badly cropped with fake receipts attached, an attempt to smear me. I laughed. Rookie move. But the message was clear. She wasn't done. Even when stripped of power, people like her don't vanish. They bide time, plot, poison wells, turn old friends into weapons. So no, I don't walk around feeling like a hero. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a message to everyone who thinks silence is protection. Sometimes you have to burn the system down to survive it. And if it tries to rebuild itself into the same monster, you torch it again and again and again until the ground stops smelling like fear.